Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there ruled a god over Egypt. His name was Osiris. Okay, I don't know why I'm British right now. So, there was a god in Egypt in the days of yonder named Osiris. And he ruled over Egypt as king with his queen / sister Isis. I don't know why there's incest in this story, but that's neither here nor there. And Osiris was a wise, good king, respected by his people. But he had a brother, Seth, who was envious of him, as ugly people are. And Seth would not take Osiris's success just lying down. He was like, no, I'm gonna kill him. So one night when Osiris was sleeping, Seth goes into his bedchamber and takes his measurements. And then, get your mind out of the gutter. He took the measurement of his height and his body size. You pervert. And he took those measurements to a carpenter, and he commissioned a beautifully decorated wooden chest with the exact proportions of Osiris's dick. No, I'm just kidding. With the exact proportions of Osiris's height. Somehow the carpenter was able to build this chest in like less than one business day. Now, the next morning, Seth decided to throw a party for that night and invite Osiris as the guest of honor. At his party that night, there are lots of games for the guests to play, and after they all guess the number of jelly beans in a jar, he invites his guests to play another game, which is to go into this wooden chest and see if you fit. And the person who fits into the chest is going to be allowed to keep it. So of course, everyone takes turns going into the chest, and obviously they all fail. And then when it's Osiris's turn, Seth and his friends slam the lid shut and take the chest and throw it into the Nile. Now, when Isis finds out about this, she's like, "How dare you kill my husband, brother?" And so she frantically goes and searches for his body in the river. After a while, she finds the chest floating on the river. She pulls it onto the shore and takes his body out and hides it in the riverbank, because she's going to come back with her sister and some of her friends and perform some rituals for him to move on to the afterlife. However, later that night, Seth is also looking for his dead bro, and he finds him on the riverbank. And to make sure that he's like covered his tracks and he's like his murder is like good, done, and sealed, he dismembers Osiris's body into 14 pieces and throws them all over Egypt. So, you get a piece, you get a finger, you get a foot, you get a leg, you get a dick. The next morning, again, these people are working at like record speed. I don't know how this guy took his brother's measurements, got a bespoke chest, threw a party, killed his brother, and then dismembered the corpse all in like the span of 24 hours. Anyway, the next morning, Isis comes back to where she hid the body, and she finds that it's gone. She flies over Egypt, finds the parts of his body, and over the course of several nights, she puts his body back together. Not to be confused with Humpty Dumpty. She put him together, she mummified him, and then on the full moon, Isis performed some rituals, breathed the breath of life, and brought him back to the living. Now, Osiris comes back to life, and he's alive just long enough for him and Isis to conceive a son. So I don't know what freaky ass agenda she had. Afterwards, he says, "Thanks, ladies. Thank you for bringing me back to life, but I am no longer part of the world of the living. Okay, I have to go to the afterlife, and that's where I'm going to go and become king of the afterlife." Self-appointed, of course, because literally who asked for you to be their king? Time passes. Isis gives birth to their son Horus, and she raises him in hiding because Seth is still king. After he's grown up and ready to fight his envious uncle one-on-one, I'm just realizing now that Seth was Osiris's brother, but he was also Isis's brother, because this is like this whole Game of Thrones incest going on. Anyway, so Horus grows up and he finally goes and fights Seth. And of course, Horus is victorious. He becomes king on Earth, and Seth is banished forever. Freaking loser. And they lived happily ever after. Hello, baddies. Welcome back to another episode where I talk about a topic that you voted on in a poll on my Instagram story. So today's episode is all about why divine femininity is a load of crap. And I'm really excited to talk about this because I learned so much while preparing for this episode. And it really put a lot of things in perspective for me in terms of my own content and the things that I've shared over the past year, because I feel like I've come a long way. I've learned a lot. And the mindset that I had and the person who I was when I put out my first episode, Law 1, Don't Be Humble, is not the same person you're listening to today. And I feel like if you've binged all my episodes, you probably realized that too. Like, I feel like I've come a long way. But anyway, I'm really excited to talk about this. I'm so glad you baddies voted on this. So, this story about Isis is a pretty well-known story. You might have heard of it. It might be familiar. And that's because Isis is one of the most well-known goddesses in ancient Egyptian mythology and also in the divine femininity school of thought. Can we call it school of thought? Can I call you Mister? So Isis is the goddess of motherhood, magic, fertility, death, healing, rebirth. She symbolizes a lot of things. And these goddesses are part of a larger pattern of stories, philosophies, religions, mythologies that had feminine deities or femininity tied to some divine being. So a little bit of quick history. Hey everyone, it's Editing Neeki. So while I was editing this part of the episode, I wasn't happy with how it was going. So I'm going to re-record the history of the divine feminine, and I'm going to keep it really, really brief. So archaeological research has shown that goddess worship dates back to around 30,000 BCE. So obviously that's tens of thousands of years of history that I'm just not going to go over because this will be like a 20-part episode. But to simplify it, divine femininity has been present in a lot of different cultures, philosophies, religions. Like we saw with the example that I opened with, it's present in Egyptian mythology, also Greek mythology. It's present in a lot of Eastern philosophies and religions like Hinduism, Buddhism. It's present in a lot of indigenous cultures. And so to talk about just one history of the divine feminine doesn't make sense because there's so many different variations of it. Generally, the way history went down is that with the rise of agriculture and Abrahamic religions, we see a decline in divine femininity. For example, Abrahamic religions have placed the masculine as part of the divine. God is a he, and women have to submit to their husbands, and the husbands or the men have to submit to Jesus or God or whatever divine being it may be who is masculine. Powerful women are accused of being witches, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea. Again, I don't want to paint this as just one homogenous history, and I don't want it to sound like there's a pre-divine femininity and a post-divine femininity era where after the rise of agriculture and religion, everything became patriarchal, and before that, everything was matriarchal or at least somewhat equal. That's not the case either. So just to give you an idea of how these concepts came to be, because what we're going to talk about later on in this episode is that the divine femininity that we see on TikTok and on social media is very much a bastardized version of a lot of these philosophies and religions. I think it makes a lot of sense now to actually define what divine femininity is. Divine femininity refers to a set of characteristics or energies that's present within everybody, man or woman, it doesn't matter your gender. It's present in everybody, and it actually serves as the complementary counterpart to the divine masculine energies and traits that we all have. A person who achieves balance between the divine feminine and the divine masculine energies within them is in a state of harmony. Some common divine feminine traits are intuition, nurturing, healing, empathy, flow, being in a flow state or going with the flow, creativity, flexibility, tenderness. Now, some divine masculine qualities are logic, reasoning, action, leading, strength, rationality, problem solving, decision making. You get the idea. The problem that I have, that I cannot wrap my head around, is that when we label something as feminine or masculine, these words, feminine, masculine, femininity, masculinity, these words are so loaded with meaning that it's extremely dangerous to label things as such, especially in the patriarchal society that we live in. Let's talk about masculinity. The way a lot of boys are socialized is to be a specific type of guy. And that type of guy cannot be feminine. Because if you're feminine, then you're labeled as gay. And being feminine or gay is one of the worst things you can be if you're socialized as a boy. That's why there's so much bullying, there's so much homophobia within the conventional understanding of masculinity. Because to be feminine or to be gay is basically to be less of a man. So when we label things like nurturing, empathy, compassion, we label these things as feminine traits. What signal does that send to boys? That they can't be empathetic or nurturing or compassionate, because then they end up looking like they're gay or they're effeminate. On the flip side, traits like leading and action and decisiveness are labeled as masculine. And there's a lot less stigma for women to be quote unquote masculine. But when we attribute these things with masculinity, we're actually repackaging female hysteria and feeding into the myth that women are more emotional than men. Because when something like leading or decisiveness or action is labeled as masculine, then what does that tell you about how a woman would lead? And this is completely at odds with a lot of research that shows that women actually tend to be better leaders than men. Granted, women tend to have a different leadership style than men. They tend to incorporate empathy and a lot of quote unquote feminine traits in their leadership, which makes them effective leaders. But when we go around labeling leadership as inherently masculine, what message does that send to girls and women? We're left with the big risk of gender essentialism, which is the belief that men and women are fundamentally different because of biological qualities. If we revisit the story of Isis and Osiris, we can actually see a lot of elements of how divine femininity, even in the days of yonder, were like things that we can't be jiggy with, okay? For example, Isis uses her Isis uses her powers to bring Osiris back to life so that they can be a little freaky and for her to conceive a child so that she can sustain the male lineage. And if we even look at why Isis had to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, is because her brother-in-law / brother killed Osiris because of envy. She is exercising her powers because of the consequences of male competition and male envy. And Isis, along with a lot of other female deities, are still operating within this archetype of a nurturing mother. She want to talk about mothers. Oh my god, it is way too early in the episode for me to be glitching. There are goddesses whose sole job is not to be a mother, for example, Athena in Greek mythology. But even if you know a little something something about Greek mythology, Athena wasn't a girl's girl. She was actually a very big misogynist, like with her whole beef with Medusa. Versace, Versace, Medusa, Hedami, Lakamnu, Minadi. I'm sorry, every time I think of Medusa, I think of Versace. But even a goddess like Athena, who's the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, and is the protector of cities like Athens, which is actually named after her, even if we look at someone like that, she was born out of Zeus's forehead. I mean, do y'all have the same mental image that I have? Or like, are you picturing what I'm picturing on Zeus's forehead? That origin story is kind of giving Eve being born from Adam's rib. So we have to understand that all of this is made up. I come on this podcast every week and I always talk about how everything is made up because it is. And a lot of history and stories and myths and legends and all of these things, doctrines, philosophies, I dare even say religions, and I might offend people for that, but everything is made up. It's an idea that someone thought of. It's a story that someone wrote down and passed down to people, or passed it down through a game of broken telephone if it wasn't written. And also keep in mind that the majority of human history, almost 100% of human history, was written by men. And not just by men, but about men. Even look at the word God versus goddess. The default word is God. And even during my research for this episode, a lot of resources that I looked at would refer to goddesses or female deities as female goddesses, female gods, female deities. The word female had to be there because the default is a male figure. So what does that tell you about how a lot of these ideas were conceived and how they're packaged today? The problem now is that what so many people think of as divine femininity now, especially these TikTok creators and all these people online, is that they equate divine femininity with receiving. And I hear this all the time. Oh, I'm in my feminine. Or I heard this one when I was going through a TikTok rabbit hole of divine femininity crap. I'm in my pleasure. Or I've also heard, and you've probably seen this all over Reels and TikToks, women talking about turning off my brain when I'm with my boyfriend, or the feminism leaving my body when he, pays for the bill or something stupid like that. It's as if femininity means receiving and masculinity means leading. And that looks an awful lot like the way that religions discuss masculinity and femininity. So it's become this warped incognito patriarchy. We also have to keep in mind the point in time where this is coming from. We recently exited this wave of girl boss feminism where it was really celebrated for women to hustle and work really hard and climb the corporate ladder, which is all great things. Like if that's what you want to do, by all means. But it kind of ignored the fact that when women clock out from work, they come home and clock into their domestic job. And that's still a huge source of inequality. Now, I understand we are in this post-hustle culture, post-girl boss era. I feel like I'm the embodiment of that because I left my very much hustle culture corporate job to do something creative and to work for myself. But now we're at this point in time where we're at another extreme. We're at another extreme of, I want to say inactivity, but this receiving energy and being in my feminine and receiving and letting the man lead and all that crap. You realize that now you are celebrating being passive, which is exactly what the patriarchy wants you to do, which is why I come on here behind this mic every freaking week and talk about how you have to stop being passive, stop being a people pleaser, how you have to unlearn a bunch of crap, and then all this stupid divine femininity stuff is coming in and undoing all the work that I'm doing. Like, be so for real right now. Hey baddies, it's editing Neeki again. Another thing I want to mention is that I've heard a lot of women in real life and online talk about how they don't want a career, or how they have a career but eventually they want to stop working so that they can be a housewife or they can be with a provider. The rise in this kind of thinking has happened over the last few years with a lot of divine femininity and dark femininity content creators. And although I see a lot of merit in wanting to be with a man who can provide for you and give you a better version of the life that you're creating for yourself, I agree with that. That's absolutely what I want for myself. But the issue with this line of thinking is that it neutralizes a lot of the ambition that women can have. And whereas girl boss feminism was all about going out and hustling and building a career and climbing the corporate ladder and doing all of those things, this type of feminism, if we can even call it that, puts you in the back seat. There's nothing wrong with wanting to marry a man who can provide for his wife and his family. I think that's the absolute bare minimum. But let's stop depending on other people to build the future that we want for ourselves. No one is coming to save you. If you sit back in the passenger seat of your life and wait for life to happen to you, guess what's going to happen? When you wait for things to happen to you, you're only going to attract bad things. You're going to attract manipulators. You're going to attract people who can sense that you're sitting in the back seat, and they're going to want to come and take advantage of you and make you dependent on them. And I want to share a personal anecdote. So a few years ago, when I was working in my corporate job and I just was miserable, I hated it, I began falling into this trap of wanting to abandon my career and just be a trophy wife. That's the mindset I got into. And looking back at that, I realized I fell into that trap, into that line of thinking, because I was just absolutely miserable. I was miserable and I was in an environment that rewarded competition, but not creativity. But more than anything, it was because I was so miserable in my job. I genuinely couldn't see myself working like that and being, a 9 to 5 worker for the next 40 years of my life. And I thought to myself, if I have to choose between this and marrying a guy who can provide for me and, I wouldn't have to work, then there's an obvious answer to that. There's an obvious choice. It wasn't until I realized that the only person keeping me trapped in a 9 to 5 is me. Because that's just one option for a career. That's an option that many people choose. Many people are happy with that, and that's great. That wasn't the option for me. So because I was in an environment that was so incompatible with what I wanted for my life, I went out and I thought that I had to find a provider, and my career, my eventual career would be to be someone's wife. And honestly, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that, but I feel like by sharing this story, I'm sure at least one of you out there, one of you baddies listening, was or is in that mindset. And I want to speak directly to you. You have complete control over your life. Just because you're in a career or in a job or in a situation right now, that does not mean that you are destined to be there and be in this situation for the rest of your life. You have a lot more control than you even realize. It definitely won't be easy to make a change, to pivot careers, to start a business, but it's possible. If I've done it and millions of other people have done it, and let's be real, a lot of them are not as, skilled and competent as you are, then you can absolutely do it too. Don't wait for life to happen to you. Do not put your eggs in one basket and then hand that basket to somebody else. As a woman living in the patriarchy, you can't afford to be passive and you can't afford to let life happen to you. You can't afford to leave things to chance. So I believe in you, and I'm already proud of you. What was interesting when I was going through TikTok, because it was so weird, I was sitting there just going through a bunch of divine femininity TikToks, and I honestly can say that that is the true brain rot. But anyway, there is such a focus, like from all these TikToks that I watched, there is a huge focus on waiting for somebody to provide, manifesting a man who's going to provide something for you. And at one point, I was getting so annoyed that I had to stop watching these because I'm like, this is so stupid. This is literally freaking patriarchal propaganda. Because when the revolution comes, you're going to see that if you wait for anything, you have lost complete control. And I come here every fucking week and I talk about how, like, you need to take control. You need to realize that there are a lot of things in your control and you don't wait for things and you don't ask and you say, please, sir, may I have this opportunity? Please, sir, may I receive from you? You don't ask for diddly. You take what's yours, you don't ask for permission, and you apologize later if you have to. And if you have to give a crocodile apology, then so be it. But you don't fucking wait for anything. You don't wait for anything. And all this divine femininity crap is all about just sitting there and manifesting and breathing into your womb. And that's, oh my God, that was another thing. I watched a TikTok. Maybe I'll stitch it here. It was a 4-minute TikTok of this woman talking about how to be in your divine feminine energy and become a receiver. And the second thing that she said, the first one I can't remember because I feel like my brain as a trauma response forgot about the first one. The second thing she said was, breathe into your womb.
5 micro habits to increase your divine feminine energy and constantly live in a state of receiving. Number 2 is acknowledge your womb. Breathe into your womb every single day. Feminine doesn't lead from the mind. She leads from the womb, intuition, emotion, creativity.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to be reminded of an organ that I have that causes me a lot of pain and suffering every month that I'm not even going to use. Okay? My womb is like my appendix. It's an organ that I don't intend on using. So I don't want to breathe into my womb, babe. I'm going to breathe into my stomach like my therapist taught me, and that's it. Whew, oh my God, guys. I think this is an episode brought to you by Nika Farrell. Because this is not Neeki anymore. This is Nika, my alter ego. So I understand that, and I say this all the time, to be a woman, in my opinion, is to be one of the highest forms of being because you're like a portal into this world. You have the ability to create and sustain life. So yes, I say this all the time too. Women are creators because we are. But then to equate everything feminine with creation, to me, that's just gender essentialism. I believe that about 90% of masculinity and femininity are made up. There are some biological aspects to it that obviously influence the way our brains are hardwired and influence our physiological and our hormonal and biological differences because men and women they're not the same, but they're not as different as we think they are. Listen, I believe that a lot of masculinity is tied to doing. There's a huge social aspect to it because boys have been socialized in a very particular way. And I've come on this podcast before and I've talked about receiving. I have. What was it, law 11 or 12 about being comfortable with receiving. Like, I've come on here and I've said that you need to receive. If you're a woman and you want to hack the patriarchy, one of the things that you can do is to receive and be comfortable in the receiver role because that creates a harmony between your femininity and the masculinity of the person who's providing for you or giving something to you. I feel like I've come a long way since that episode. I still believe that you should be a receiver. I think that you should be comfortable with receiving favors, gifts, help, anything that can make your life easier. I think you deserve that, right? You deserve to have somebody help you out, give you a nice gift, give you a helping hand, open the door for you, do these things for you. And it's a way for you to get the things that you want, because if you use your femininity, which is, again, a lot of it is socially constructed, but if you use that to complement someone's masculinity, which is also mostly socially constructed, then you will have a sense of harmony, especially in a relationship or even in a work setting where you're working with a male colleague, coworker Anthony. I feel like if I were to go and redo that episode, I would start off by saying that for the most part, masculinity and femininity are made up. And I would be very, very clear that receiving does not mean passivity. It does not mean being passive. It just means that you allow somebody to do something for you to make your life easier. That's what receiving means to me. It means being taken care of, not because you can't take care of yourself, because I'm a firm believer that if you're going to ask somebody to do anything for you, you should probably be able to do that thing for yourself. If I like when my man takes me shopping, for example, or gets me a gift, it's not because I can't take myself shopping or I can't afford a gift. It's that for me, that's a way to show care and effort and respect. And that's a term of a relationship that I want. Does it have to do with receiving? Yes. Does it mean I'm passive? No. Because guess what? If I don't receive what I want, I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave. Because it's my way or the highway. The other issue with this divine femininity crap is that there's so much focus on creativity. Listen, I am a creative. I create for a living. I appreciate creativity. I think every person, man or woman, has creative abilities within them. We live in a society where if you say you want to be an artist or you want to be some kind of creative, um, whatever, you want to create something, you want to be an artist, you want to be a singer, you want to be a songwriter, you want to be a podcaster, whatever, people's response is going to be that you're going to be unemployed or you're not going to make any money from that. You're going to be a starving artist, for example, or you're going to be an actress who's going to go and wait tables. So, as a society and under capitalism, we've divorced creativity from profitability. We don't think of creativity as being a legitimate avenue to a career anymore. And so, people who want to pursue something like that are not taken seriously. Does that mean inherently that creativity is feminine? No. For example, I'm reading a fantasy series called The Stormlight Archive, and it's written by a man. And when I read this book, I'm like, you need to be so creative. I also think you need to be high as fuck to write something like this, but this is creativity. I'm holding a piece of creativity created by a man. Does that mean he was in his feminine energy when he wrote that? I don't know, but I think that it's really harmful to associate very specific things with femininity or masculinity because these are made up and they're informed by an agenda. So you have to be very cautious and read between the lines when you're presented with any type of philosophy like this, because it really it can become dogma. And what we see right now with divine femininity is that it is a warped, bastardized, dogmatic school of thought that repackages patriarchy in a really weird way that seems attractive, but really, once you look too deeply into it, you realize that it's a load of crap. I don't think it's liberating. I think it's limiting because, again, look at the power structures that would benefit from somebody being in their feminine and being passive and receiving and manifesting a man. Who benefits from that? Men who want to take advantage of you. So get in the habit of thinking who will benefit from this. In any case, in any, whatever you're presented with, ask yourself who's going to benefit from this. And a lot of women are waking up to this and realizing that divine femininity is the term I came across a lot is a pipeline to the alt-right. People also call it Mormonism, or they say that it's like being a trad wife. And I think these are all very valid concerns. I think these are all very valid perceptions of what divine femininity looks like now in this weird bastardized version that we're being presented with on TikTok and Instagram and on the interwebs. If you think that femininity is about being passive, then you have not seen my mom on the phone with customer service. And if anyone listening is a customer service agent who thinks they may have been a victim of my mother, please contact the support hotline phone number that is flashing on your screen. I'm going to wrap up by saying this. Femininity and masculinity are complementary. They are complementary, but a lot of it is made up. Like 90% of it is made up. However, that is the way that we have been socialized. As women, we've been socialized one way, men have been socialized another way, and there's still ways that we can use those made up concepts of masculinity and femininity to complement one another and to get what we want out of the world, because it's not all bad. The issue comes when we do this in a way that reinforces harmful stereotypes and points to gender essentialism. So when I say things, for example, like acting dumb, I'm never saying go and act like a complete ditzy idiot. Oh my God, I don't know how to read. Oh my God, is this guy blue? I didn't know that. No, I'm saying that you make space for the other person to flex their intelligence or their perceived intelligence and to feel good about themselves. Most of the time when I'm talking about buying into these gender norms is not in a way where it makes you seem passive or lesser than or any of that crap. It's to make the other person feel good about themselves. And at the end of the day, this is just a very fundamental element of human nature and psychology. So remember, if Neeki spits it, Neeki researched it, Neeki fact-checked it, Neeki wrote it, Neeki lived it, and Neeki made sure that it was the best quality philosophy that she can put out, because I'm a fucking philosopher. Don't call me a content creator, call me a philosopher. Okay, so I've said I'm going to close this episode 95 million times. I'm going to close with this. Somebody who I think is a really good example of femininity is Hermione Granger. She's smart, she's empathetic, but she's still tough. She's a go-getter. She's not passive, but she knows how to deal with people. She knows how to deal with Ron, how to deal with Harry, how to understand people. And she's creative. She has very interesting creative ways of using jinxes and spells to get her, Ron and Harry, out of trouble or to get past an obstacle. And honestly, if Harry and Ron weren't friends with Hermione, they would have died, past tense have died, in like the Philosopher's Stone, the first book. So that's who I like to think of as a really strong embodiment of femininity and of a lot of really good elements that we associate both with femininity and masculinity, but that she embodies as a baddie, the baddest bitch at Hogwarts. So for the 901st millionth time, I'm going to end this episode here. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I have launched the group chat with the baddies on Patreon. It's actually a group chat on Instagram. So shout out to all the baddies who've joined. We just started our first monthly challenge and I'm really excited to see how it goes and see people's progress. And I threw in a couple of some of the girlies I've collabed with. I threw in Talia, for example, because I feel like she's gonna do the challenges with us too, and she's gonna have a lot of fun things to say. So it's a little bit of a star-studded chat, you know. So it's gonna be fun. And don't forget to give the podcast a 5-star rating if you loved it. And to be honest, the best way to promote a podcast is through word of mouth. So if you love this podcast, tell your friends. If you hate it, tell your enemies. Or send your enemies some divine femininity crap. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget that you are the baddest bitch in any building that you step foot in. And until next time, stay bad and don't fall for all this passive, stupid crap of I'm in my feminine, I'm in my receiving era. Okay, love you, bye. And of course, shout out to all the baddies on Patreon. Shout out to Yael, Jada, Sophia K, Sophia M, Melinda, Simran, Amy, Faith, Nadia, Adelaide, Nilufa, Naomi, Irene, Katya, Priya, Gemma, Mina, and Adriana. Oh, I did that almost in one breath. Thank you so much for your support.